Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rosen Sports Sunday. I'm Mike Max. Mark has the night off. You know, the Minnesota Wild did some dealing up against the salary cap. Keith Ballard, the big addition, and one foe becomes a friend. Well, they did more than that. Earlier, that Nicholas Backstrom, they made sure he's back. Matt Cullen, Devin Setaguchi, they're gone. So too is Pierre-Marc Bouchard. And now, how do the Wild look heading into the season? We break it down with a man who knows the NHL all too well for a number of very good reasons. Welcome to Rosen Sports Sunday, and welcome to Brian Lott. Brian, thanks for coming in. Nice to see a man that appreciates a good suit.
Well, my pleasure to be here, Mike. You know that.
It's an interesting time when free agency starts, because we've seen frenzies here. Last year, the epitome, and then we see this last year when you're up against the cap. In general, is the cap working? Is the salary cap good in the NHL?
I think it's been good. You know, we saw some real insanity the last couple of days. About 75 guys signed, $400 million spent. Not quite sure what the lockout was for, but, you know, when it's all said and done, it definitely helps the majority of the clubs.
Take a look at the Minnesota Wild specifically. Last year, of course, the big 4th of July celebration, Ryan Suter and Zach Parise signed with the team. They had productive seasons, and they still finished 8th in the West. Good signings, even though it eats up a lot of the salary cap?
I think they're great signings. You got two terrific young men. They really both delivered on what they were brought here to do. Parise, obviously, to add some spark, to add some offense. He did that. I think we can expect more of that, and he's going to only do more as he gets more comfortable. And Ryan Suter, he just hit new levels for the Wild. He accomplished things that maybe a guy like Shea Weber was preventing him from accomplishing in Nashville. Now that he's the top dog here for Minnesota, he really delivered. And in my opinion, that was probably the best free agent signing last year.
Should those two then, in essence, down the road maybe attract some more bargains, so to speak, because people will want to come and play for a couple like that, and it shows that you're committed? Does that psychology work at all?
You know what? Absolutely. The National Hockey League now more than ever is about recruiting, Mike, and good players want to play with other good players. The Wild were lacking some real names. I mean, they've had some success in their history, not as much as they would like, you know, certainly the previous 3, 4, 5 years, but you bring in a couple guys like Ryan and like Zach, and all of a sudden other good players take notice. Minnesota is an incredible place to play. These guys are the best spokesmen right now for the team for that.
If there was a surprise a little bit, I think, to fans, was Devin Setaguchi to Winnipeg for just a second-round pick. Again, some salary implications, but he's only 26, and you wonder, it didn't seem like the logical guy to move.
No, you know what? Players are just like anything else in life. They have ups and downs. Devin had some really strong years in San Jose, but for whatever reason, I just don't think he hit that level for the Minnesota Wild. I think this is a good move by them. I also think he'll go on and play well for Winnipeg, but it wasn't happening here. They had some salary cap issues they had to deal with, and to me, this was a very logical move, and I think it was a good move for him.
Matt Cook, you bring in the guy that we see as the villain from Vancouver. Sure. Obviously, he's had some years, but does he fill a void of Cal Clutterbuck? You know, is this people say, where does this come from? Matt Cook, why do they spend all the money on him?
Well, Matt's definitely toned his act down, and the reality is that $2.5 million on a 3-year deal, it's not an excessive amount by salary cap standards in today's world. Certainly a lot of money. I don't mean to say it isn't, but this to me is also, it's a very good signing for the Wild. This is the type of guy that they need. It's going to add some character and grit. I don't think there was a lot of options necessarily in this range, but this is a guy that Mike Yeo, that Chuck Fletcher are very familiar with. They know exactly what they're getting. I look at this year as more of a transition for the Wild. The salary cap came down. It's putting a lot of pressure on all the teams' payrolls, on all the teams' cap space. So you really just need to kind of survive this year.
Figure it out a little bit,
particularly, I'm seeing a lot of teams making lateral moves more than anything.
Yeah, it was Keith Ballard, a good example. Gilbert out, Ballard in. He gets bought out in Vancouver. Obviously, the defense at the top, you mentioned Suter and you got Brodin. Does he bring you that quality 6th defenseman? What do you see here?
Well, he's definitely going to help their group. There's no doubt about it. And it's obviously going to be a huge thrill for Keith to be back in the area. He lives here in the summer as it is. Bally's a great guy. He's a good character guy, and I expect him to add a lot. I think that as we're looking here at these hits, you know, he's just going to bring some competitiveness and physicality.
Knows the game well.
He knows the game well. He knows the area. It's not going to be a very big transition for him. I think this is also a very good signing for the Wild.
They locked up Nicholas Backstrom before that, obviously, and he could have been a free agent, an unrestricted free agent, and played the market. You know, it's not just Backstrom coming back. It's the whole idea of, we don't know where Josh Harding's at. Is Kemper ready? Is this the biggest concern, do you think? Is this position in general, not just Backstrom with his health?
I think it was the biggest concern until Nick Backstrom came back. And when he came back, you know, this really said a lot to me, Mike, about the area, about Minnesota as a community. Nick Backstrom was clearly a guy that could have moved on. And in my opinion, he could have moved on for more money. He didn't. He loves it here. He's been here his entire career in the National Hockey League. And I think it says a lot about playing for the Minnesota Wild, wanting to be a member of the Minnesota Wild. And I think they have absolutely secured this position, certainly for the next 2-3 years.
You know, Chicago Blackhawks have been interesting to watch over the last few years. You've watched them closely. You've competed against them when you were down in Tampa. Is this just about being bad enough and then having the right draft picks come up so that you end up with the Taves and Kane, or is it more complicated than that, what they've done?
Well, it's interesting. When I was in Tampa, we studied a number of teams like Pittsburgh, like Washington, like the Chicago Blackhawks, and quite frankly, a team we had identified at the time as the next up-and-comer was the LA Kings. And the thing that all these clubs had in common is they had all missed 5, 6, 7, 8 years in a row.
In the playoffs.
In some cases, they had all missed the playoffs. Chicago went on an incredible run. They get Kane, they get Taves, but Stan Bowman's done a really nice job too. They've had to kind of rip this team down a couple times, and they've maintained that really high level, so they've shown that it can be done.
And again, you get Hossa because you got Kane and Taves, and that's kind of the Wild's theory here, right?
Exactly. I think, you know, when you look, the one difference that Chicago had, and all the other teams had, quite frankly, and we had it in Tampa, was we had a 1 and a 2 pick. We had Stamkos and Hedman. Chicago didn't have a 1 and 2, but they had a 1 and 3 in Taves.
And then it's got to be the right draft.
Pittsburgh had a 1 and a 2 and a 1 in Fleury, and you know, there's a lot of different elements that you look at. In Minnesota's case, you know, they never really had that poor performance where they got flushed down to the bottom.
There are no
and let me tell you, Mike, it's not fun to do that. When I went to Tampa, we were dead last. That next year we finished 29th. I knew it would be the best thing for the organization long term.
Brian, thank you so much for coming in. Always appreciate it. Hope to see you back in the NHL soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mike.
Brian Lawton, a name that means hockey, you bet. Hey, when we come back, a boxing match 90 years ago that changed the life of a Minnesotan and a town in Montana. And Vikings linebacker Chad Greenway on what it means to now be the leader of a team where he wants to leave his legacy. A candid conversation coming up next. Welcome back. Chad Greenway came from the University of Iowa, hoping to make an impact with the Vikings. Suffered a knee injury early, recovered, and eventually became a foundation part of the organization. He is now a leader on this team, and he wants to go out as a man who helped his boyhood team reach new heights. Chad, you talk about getting involved in the community. This one's become very important to you. Tell me about that, because you've been committed to this as part of your foundation for a long time.
These events aren't, you know, the things we do with our foundation aren't possible without events like this, and it's just nice to be able to do it with good people, have a great day, and enjoy a nice golf course.
Because it goes to the lockers. Explain what that means. When I say the lockers, you know what that means.
Yeah, so our locker program is a program that we've put in 3 hospitals throughout the Twin Cities now. We've put one in Hudson, at Children's, and at Amplatz. And, you know, we've just gotten such good feedback from the families and the kids who are able to use these iPads, cameras, laptops, Nintendo DS gaming systems, just a bunch of different technology that sometimes may not be the most educational thing for a kid, but we've just found that it's, even going through our own experience with my dad, is that it just gives these kids something to do. Whether it only be for a couple hours, maybe a kid's sitting down getting some sort of a transfusion or an infusion of medications, and he's just sitting there bored, you know, when the cartoons aren't on. So you give him an iPad and you throw him a couple games and gives him, you know, something to do. They can do a reading game or Angry Birds game or something, and just, it's little things like that maybe you're not making this big, crazy difference, but it just gives, makes that parent's job a little bit easier.
What's this summer been like for you? You got your knee scoped, and it sounds like everything is heading in the right direction, and nobody's that concerned about whether you'll be 100%.
Right. Yeah, no, it is, and it wasn't something I wanted to do. It was something more. I got to the point where, if I want to be healthy and going through a full season the way I want to be, it's going to mean do something now and get it done, which I did, almost coming on 3 weeks. So I'll be good to go by training camp, full speed, and shouldn't miss a beat, and that was kind of what I was going for, and the reason I sort of had to take a few weeks here in the summer to do it now and just to wait and then have a full healthy season, hopefully.
How is it different coming back this year with the Minnesota Vikings when you're coming off a playoff year and maybe some unexpected success?
Well, I think it just gives you the confidence that, what other people are saying. We had such a young team last year, and I think maybe even younger this year. I think it just gives these guys an example of you don't have to be the one that everybody's talking about all the time that's going to give you any success. We've been that team before. We've had some success with that. We've had some failures with that. I think now we're just a team that, okay, we know they're a tough team. We know they can run the ball. We know they can stop the run, play good defense. They're going to show up to play. I think it's indicative like that San Francisco game last year in the Dome. It just shows you who we are and what we're capable of doing. You see that team going to, with a different quarterback going to the Super Bowl. So we know we're on that level. We just got to put it all together, be more consistent, don't have a lull in the middle of the season, and just continue to play the way we finished last year.
We've talked about this before, but you got a nice contract, and with that comes leadership, because guys know who gets paid, and maybe as much as anything, it was your permission to lead or to be a leader. You took that very seriously.
It sort of provides that path for you, I think, and especially amongst the guys in the locker room. And I always say that a contract is earned, especially in your second one. If you don't go and have 3 or 4 good years, you don't get to that point. So it's not about necessarily living up to that contract. Your play, obviously, you've proven to earn that. That's why they gave it to you. Now just continue your play and continue to be the other things they're asking you to be: a leader, off-season, in-season, off the field, on the field. Just be that example that guys can look to and say, okay, this is how I want my career to go. This is how I want my foundation to go. I want to do things off the field. I want to be here in the off-season all the time. I want to do things the right way.
Legacy is important to you. You talk about the charities, you talk about being a good football player, but what is it at the end of this that you want people to say?
I think the biggest thing that I want, and obviously you can never foresee what's going to happen in the next few years, but I think the biggest thing for me is I'd love to play for one organization in my career. I thought Jim Kleinsasser, the way he did it and finished his career, was really special, especially being the local Upper Midwest kid from South Dakota and just being around or hearing and always having the Vikings news on as a kid and just seeing how the team was always on. And
it's different, isn't it? It's different when you grow up with a team.
I think it's a little more special to me, and I hope the fans and the people that are Vikings fans understand that, yes, you get a contract, you play football, but it's more than that to me. It's about being a part of the community, living here, and being really within the organization, trying to broaden it, make it better. And I think for me, it's about trying to finish. Like I said, as a Viking, you can't always write that future, and that's not my decision to make eventually. But I have 3 strong years left, hopefully, and then we go after that. So that's really what I think it is loyalty. They've been so good to me in this organization. I think it's just right that I give it back to them twofold.
Indeed. Hey, the 4th of July last week marked the 90th anniversary of one of boxing's most infamous fights. David McCoy has the story of boxing's biggest blunder, the small Montana town that suffered a knockout blow, and the St. Paul man at the center of it all.
It's long since been torn down, but nearly 100 years ago, the Gibbons Brothers Gym was one of the biggest points of pride in downtown St. Paul.
I was never known to be a puncher at the start, and as a matter of fact, I don't think I was ever a puncher. I learned the technique of hitting a fellow where it was most vulnerable. The left hook under the right arm, the liver, the center of all nerve centers.
Tommy Gibbons fought some of the biggest names in the game.
Some of the really top-notchers in the business.
But his biggest fight came near the end of his career, in the smallest of places, which became one of the biggest catastrophes in sports history.
This was just meant to be a publicity stunt.
A year earlier, 1922, the tiny town of Shelby, Montana had discovered oil. And that small town got some big dreams of becoming an economic hub of the West.
If you've ever seen Shelby, it's very much of a prairie town.
A prairie town with metropolitan ambition. They thought a publicity stunt would spark interest. And in those days, there was no bigger publicity than the heavyweight title fight.
Literally, the country would come to a standstill.
For perspective, in 1923, hosting the heavyweight title fight would be akin to hosting the Super Bowl now. Hosting the Super Bowl here.
From scratch, built a 40,000-seat arena in the town of Shelby.
The reigning heavyweight champ was Jack Dempsey, the star athlete of the era, and an American icon.
Jack was one of those bone crushers. He was a strong, killing type.
He wasn't just the Mike Tyson of the 20s. He was bigger than Babe Ruth.
Where Babe Ruth was making $100,000 a year, Jack Dempsey was making $500,000 a year.
Shelby's leaders offered Dempsey's manager, Jack Kearns, $200,000 for the fight, an exorbitant amount in those days, and certainly a stretch for small-time Shelby.
I don't think they expected a response. They were just looking to make a splash.
But Kearns was intrigued. Tommy Gibbons was chosen as Dempsey's opponent.
He was thrilled to have an opportunity to prove himself.
And Shelby sent a guy named Loy Mullenby to Chicago to close the deal.
Jack Kearns was very much the sly fox, and that they must have gotten this Loy Mullenby drunk and then got him to sign a contract for $300,000 instead of $200,000.
But Shelby pushed on and ponied up. They built the arena, hotels, and extra railroad track to accommodate all the special trains chartered to bring in spectators from across the country.
And so they had a hard time coming up with the money.
And as the deadline approached to pay Kearns, the sly fox applied pressure.
It was kind of a catch-22. He wouldn't agree that the fight would actually go on, and then because he wouldn't agree that the fight would go on, they'd have trouble raising money. Well, then so it was kind of a vicious circle.
The bad publicity doomed the publicity stunt. All the special trains chartered to Shelby were canceled. The fight went on, but in a nearly empty arena.
You can see in some of the old fight footage of this 40,000-seat arena, there's like maybe 14,000, 15,000 people, that only like 7,000 or 8,000 of these people actually paid for tickets.
Those who saw the fight saw a good one. Gibbons in the black shorts, Dempsey in white.
Dempsey's a wild man with the gloves on. I really thought I could beat Dempsey.
He almost did. Gibbons fought the fight of his life. It went the full 15 rounds.
As a matter of fact, my grandfather is the only person to ever go 15 rounds with Jack Dempsey.
For 15 rounds, it was a tough affair, and Jack won at the end.
It's been said that Gibbons didn't lose the fight. The town of Shelby did, nearly going bankrupt.
There were 3 banks in Shelby that failed right after the fight, and then a 4th one in Great Falls.
Kearns and Dempsey left Shelby with their money, and the little town's grand ambitions left with them.
So on July 4th, 1923, the far-sighted businessmen of Shelby, Montana made their indelible impression on boxing history, but not without paying a tremendous price.
Things might not have worked out so well for Shelby, but the fight was great for Gibbons.
The fights that he had afterwards, that he was able to charge more than if he had never had this fight.
After retiring 2 years later, his popularity landed him a job touring vaudeville. He was king of the St. Paul Winter Carnival, knighted twice by the Catholic Church, and elected Ramsey County Sheriff for 24 years.
He was a very likable guy. He was the kind of person that everybody seemed to like.
Tom Gibbons, brilliant heavyweight boxer.
May I recommend boxing to all of the boys? It's a great thing for them. But you've got to pay the price.
Nobody knows that better than Shelby, Montana.
Jack Dempsey, outside of the ring, is the greatest guy you ever met in your life. But inside, he's a son of a gun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we know what you mean. Great story. Tommy Gibbons was never paid for the fight in Shelby. He got $10,000 in training expenses. Wow, 90 years ago. Well, you may have heard the story. A local runner loses her life when a tree falls on her during a routine walk. But what she gave while she was here is what makes her so remarkable. You've probably heard the story by now, and it is shocking. Nina McKay walking her dog Friday afternoon in Eden Prairie when a tree inexplicably broke and fell on her. She was pronounced dead. I happen to live in the same neighborhood as Nina, and she was some kind of athlete, running up to 10 miles a day, a marathoner. Then after she'd run, she'd go work out at the health club. 56 years old. Everybody in the neighborhood and the development and much of Eden Prairie knew her just as Nina. She was active in the school, in politics, and above all, a mother to 2 and a devoted wife. She was the most popular person on that side of town, and if you knew her, and many of you did, you know how much she will be missed. We'll be right back. Thanks for watching Rosen Sports Sunday. Now, coming up next week, a special story. Metropolitan Stadium was torn down in 1985, and there are pieces of it all over the metropolitan area. But one of the ballpark's most defining features has gone missing. The Met was known for its massive triangular foul poles. Remember them? Well, one of them was cut in half and put at Haddock's Field at Valley View Park in Bloomington. But the whereabouts of the other one, a mystery. Tune in next week as David McCoy searches high and low to try and find the missing pole.
Oh, do I ever wonder what happened to the other one? And it just kind of like it disappeared.
That's next week on Rosen Sports Sunday, a great story. Thanks for watching. See you back here next week. Have a great night, everyone. All right, boys, that's a good show, and that's a wrap.